Namaskar. Very good afternoon, dear learners. I, Dr. Renu Tomo, welcome you to CEC Live Lectures. Friends, the topic which we have been discussing till date is very important. It is very relevant, not only from the perspective of school management, but also for all the administrators, all the managers, may it be at the helm of the affair or in the middle management or may be involved at the lower management. Friends, the topic which I have been discussing with you is understanding organizational behavior for improving school management. Today, we shall be taking up part 7 of the series of lecture on this particular topic. Friends, just to recall what we have done in previous 6 parts, we have tried to understand what organization behavior is, how it has come into being. We also tried to understand, apart from its nature and features, we also tried to analyze what are the scope of organizational behavior. While talking about the scope of organizational behavior, we talked about certain factors which are to be understood for any administrator as far as organizational behavior's scope is concerned. We have, in scope of organization, we have already discussed impact of personality on performance, employee motivation, leadership. We have also covered how to create effective teams and groups, as well as we have also dealt with how different organizational structures come into being and how they are to be studied in relevance to the particular organization which is being managed by us. We have also discussed individual behavior, his attitude and learning theories with relevance to the management of the school. So, now today we shall be talking about perception. Perception, which is another scope for organization behavior, and it is very important. It is very important from the perspective that the perception is about the individual, about his goals, how the individual perceives himself in the organization, how the individual perceives the organization as such. Also about the fact that what kind of perception the individual has about the job which he is doing. For example, we have also studied in our previous lecture that pay is important, but there are other aspects also of the job characteristics which are important. The level of challenge which is being provided to the individual while working, that is of more important than the pay. In fact, the potential of the job to make one engaged is more important. We also talked about that why and when the job becomes stressful. When we talked about the theory of stress, we also talked about the theories with relevance to organization management, that is time management, as well as creating good social network. Why good social network is important? Good social network is important because the organization is itself combination of social groups, and school in particular is a social organization. It is created by society for certain objectives. That makes it a social organization. So, leader of that school, the manager of the school, may it be the headmaster, may it be the vice principal, principal or the coordinators, they should be good at social network. Only then they would be able to deal with the problem, they would be proactively be able to see what is coming up on their way. So friends, today we shall be talking about perception. What is perception? Perception is a word which has come from the Latin word perceptio. Perceptio means gathering or receiving. Now, what is being gathered or what is being received? Perception in the organization would mean the gathering of ideas, receipt of information which is being provided by the sensory organs, may it be eyes, may it be nose, may it be ears, how that is being interpreted, the interpretation of sensory information in order to represent or understand that particular information or environment is termed as perception. So, perception is different from listening or seeing or smelling, but vision involves light striking the retina of the eye, smell means odor molecules, and hearing means pressure waves. So, these are the sensory systems. How those sensory systems are to be interpreted, that is decided by the nervous system. And on what basis does nervous system decides the interpretation of those what is being seen or what is being smelled or what is being heard? That is decided by the conditioning of the individual, the genetic makeup of the individual, the training of the individual. So, nervous system plays the most important role as far as perception is concerned. Perception is not only passive receipt of those signals, rather it is shaped by learning, memory, expectations, attention, because sensory inputs are processed to transformed into low level information to high level information. For example, when we hear something, we judge it that whether it was steel or some plastic which has fallen. Suppose a glass has fallen from the table and we are not able to see it, but we hear. So, on basis of hearing, we just perceive that it might be the glass might be made up of glass or it may be made up of plastic. How do we analyze that? How do we come to that judgment? That judgment is based upon our memory, our experiences, our learning. So, perception decides not just object recognition, but also decides how it is to be reacted to. So, the process that follows connects a person's concepts and expectation. In fact, in the organization, restorative and selective mechanism, which is attention, that influence perception. So, that means if the individual is not interested in one's own work, then howsoever you may influence, motivate or pressurize him by bringing the external discipline, you wouldn't be able to make him work, because perception is a restorative and selective mechanism. Now, let us try to understand perception from the viewpoint of certain psychologists. For example, Alan Sachs and Gary Jones have basically divided the perception to be understood from three components. One is perceiver. Perceiver means the individual, the person who is perceiving. His motivational state, his emotional state, his experiences, all these factors come together as to provide us understanding of the situation, the understanding of the individual. So, the first two factors, particularly when we are talking about motivational state and emotional state of the individual, here we are not talking about the emotional state of the people who are being viewed, rather we are talking about emotional state of the individual who is perceiving. That plays a very important role. How that plays a very important role? Because generally it is seen when the person is in a angry mood or is in the bad mood, the emotional state is not soft. The result is that the person perceives the situation as not positive, or the person doesn't even perceive the other individual who is coming to him with certain request or certain work even that is not perceived positively, because the mood, the emotions are influencing the perception. Similarly, motivational state. If the individual is not motivated enough, then the perceptual defense will come up. What does perceptual defense come? When the perceiver employ to see what they want to see, that is called perceptual defense. When we talk about perceptual defense, here we have to understand the three major components of perception. One is the target. What does target means? Target means the object of perception. It may be the object, may be the situation, object may be the individual, object may be just the observation of certain work, how it is going on. The amount of information which is gathered by the sensory organs of the perceivers affect the interpretation and understanding about the target. And what is going to affect the interpretation or the understanding about the target? One, the amount of information. That means it is very much required that the sensory organs of the perceiver are working to their best ability. They shouldn't be missing. If somebody is hard of hearing, you cannot expect that person to appreciate good voice, even if it is being played for him. So, the sensory organs have to be working to their best. Apart from that, the person should have the experience at it. For example, friends, I have no knowledge of music. I don't know ragas, I don't know notes. And even if you play certain notes or ragas to me, I would be perceiving them, I would be interpreting them based upon my lack of knowledge of ragas. And in my place, if there is somebody who knows and understands music well, he or she will be able to interpret it in very much detail, because here the target is the same. Target is the song which is being heard by me as well as the other person, but because of the perception being different as far as mine and the other person is concerned, because of the experience or expertise which the other person has and I don't have, the interpretation would be different, the understanding would be different. Second important component which has been highlighted by Alan Sachs and Gary Jones is the situation. What does situation means? The environmental factors, timing and degree of stimulation that affect the process of perception. What does that mean? If we provide good song at night when a person is feeling sleepy, then naturally the person will not feel very much interested. So, the single stimulus, it is very much important that there should be very many stimulus. The percept, that is the subject for brain interpretation, would be legible to the individual only if the situation is same. The situation means the environmental factor, the timing and degree of stimulation that affect the perception of process of perception. Another important thing which we need to understand is that these factors have to be studied or understood by the organizational management. The person who is in the managerial position in the school, he has to understand and interpret that from the perspective of social perception. What does social perception means? Social perception means how the individuals, when they come together, they form the impression of certain personality, certain situation. So, social perceptions refer to identifying and utilizing social cues to make judgment about social rules, social roles, relationship, social context as well as the characteristic. For example, trustworthiness. If the individual didn't have very safe childhood, if the individual didn't have the childhood where he saw lot trust in the relationship, there is very much probability that the trustworthiness would be less in that individual in comparison to the other. Similarly, the social roles are often influenced by the kind of society from which we are coming. The cultural norms also influence social roles and social rules as well as relationship. So, when we talk about social perception, it is not just how the individual will perceive the other people as sovereign personalities, but also this also means that how the individual will identify and utilize social cues to come down to certain judgment regarding the relationship, regarding the rules, regarding the social roles. This domain also includes social knowledge. What is social knowledge? As we have already discussed, that social norms, social scheme. If the individual is well versed with the social norms, then naturally the perception of that individual will be different from the individual who is not well versed with the social norms. And friends, as all of us know, that every society has different social norms, and that is decided by the cultural difference as well as how that society has evolved to the present state from the past, and how the individuals in that society interact. So, those social norms, if they are not known to the individual well, then the perception of that individual would be different. For example, when we go to, suppose a Frenchman comes to India and he finds that every young child, may it be male, may it be the female, they are touching elders' feet. He may find it abnormal because that is not part of his social norms. So, every society has a different social norm, and accordingly the perception of the individual also vary. And apart from that, the most important thing is the feelings and emotions, how they are being picked up by the individual and converted into information. So, that is also very important. When we talk about social perception, there it is not just the verbal plays a very important role, but also non-verbal communication also plays very important role. In fact, physical appearance also plays very important role. This has been seen that in every society, the non-verbal communication is seen with much more importance than the verbal, and verbal can be easily attained, but non-verbal plays more important role. Facial expression, tone of the voice, hand gesture, body position, these are the few examples of how people communicate without words. And it has been stated by many psychologists that a person speaks more through his non-verbal expressions than through the verbal expressions. And similarly, the other person who is listening as well as watching the individual, he or she associates both the words as well as the non-verbal expressions, and if they don't match, then the untrustworthiness comes up. So, social perception has to be understood from these perspectives. As we know that in certain society, disagreeing with others is simply stated through nodding the head, or at times the person would say yes, but the body language may say no. So, that has to be studied if there is mismatch. Just to give another example, rolling the eyes is associated as disagreeing in certain culture, and if the individual, maybe that individual is just thinking and rolling his eyes, but he says yes but rolls his eyes, in that culture it may be perceived as stating no and verbally stating yes. So, that will influence the perception of the people who are observing them. There are four main components of social perception: observation, attribution, integration and confirmation. What does observation means? Observation means just the raw data which is given by the sensory organs. Sensory organs means eyes, nose and ears. So, the raw data of social perception also has three basic sources. It may be coming from the person, it may be coming from the situation, it may be coming from the behavior. Person, how does it come from the person? How that person is behaving, how that person is walking, how that person is talking, how that person is listening, all those attribute to the raw data of social perception. Similarly, situation also provides the raw data of observation. How does situation provides the raw data? Situations like if the individual is not very comfortable in the particular situation, even while speaking, then his behavior would be termed as not at par with the, it will not be perceived as appropriate, and somebody, the person who is observing, those would underline it as the individual having certain problem, because the behavior of the individual is not as expected in that particular role. So, behavior plays a very important role, and it does provide the raw data to the person who is observing, the person who is perceiving. These sources are used as a evidence in supporting person's impression or inferences about others. Another important factor which has to be understood is that how that social perception is attributing. What does attribution means? Attribution means how it is being, the individual personality is perceived as the source or cause of their behavior during an event or the situation. It is very much possible that the individual may be having positive impact, he may be very good at his work, but simply because of the shoe bite, the person is not able to work properly. So, that is also influencing his behavior, and that is also influencing the work behavior of that person. So, attribution studies it that how the individual personality is the source or cause of their behavior during an event or the situation. So, here it will study that the individual personality is fit or misfit in certain situation or event. Just to give an example, if the individual is not very communicative and we provide him the role of, the work of communicating with the other people, if that is the work profile which has been provided to the individual whose personality is not in cognizance with that work profile, then the result will be that individual will not be able to deliver well, and this is being studied by attribution. When we talk about attribution, that is what we are expressing, the individual personality which is at the source of certain behavior. To fully understand the impact of person or situational attribution, the social perceivers have to integrate all available information into unified impression and finally confirm those impressions to understand, find and create various biases. In fact, when we talk about perception, we have to understand biases also, because social perception is shaped by individuals' motivation, emotions as well as cognitive load as well as his or her biases. Now, let us try to understand what is cognitive load. Cognitive load is the complete amount of mental efforts which is utilized in the working memory. So, when we talk about cognitive load, we have to understand that how much efforts are being done by the individual, how much gray matter, his understanding, learning is being utilized, which we usually call it as potential also. in working, and all of these combined together determines how people attribute certain traits and how those traits are to be attributed. Friends, on this note, I, Dr. Renu Tomar, is leaving you with a promise to join you back again in the part 8 of the same series. In that series, we shall be talking about group behavior, how it influences the working of the organization and how it is to be controlled by school managers. Till then, Namaskar, Jai Hind, stay safe, stay healthy.